Hiya! Today I'm going to be teaching you how to crochet a mug cozy, which is this thing just here. It's got a useful little hole for the handle. As you can see, it makes a really nice cover if you've got any old mugs that the pattern's kind of scraped off. Also, it keeps your tea nice and warm, or coffee, or hot chocolate, whatever you decide to do. So I'm going to teach you how to make the basic mug cozy, which is the yellow bit just here. And you can decorate it any way you like. I've chosen to do it with some ladybirds here. If you know how to do flowers or zigzags or whatever you like, you can do the same. So as we can see here, the size of hook that I'm using is 4.5 millimeters. You can use bigger or smaller depending on the size of your mug, but I find this works really well for the average sized mug cozy. And then I'm using this lovely multicolored yarn here. In the example I showed you, I used yellow yarn, which was really nice because it worked nicely with the red of the ladybirds. But I find this is much easier for teaching because it doesn't split as often as your average double knitting yarn. So I'll be using this so you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. So I'll pop it to the side and just get the working yarn in front of me here. What we're going to do is start with a magic circle. If you know how to do this, fabulous. If not, don't worry, just follow me. It's a little bit fiddly, but we can get it. So what you do is you drape your working yarn over the front of your fingers like this and hold it in place with your thumb. Then we start wrapping the yarn around our fingers, and when you get to the front again, you cross it over the end of your yarn like so. On the back of your fingers, you don't want to cross it over, just leave two parallel bits of yarn like that. Then when we reach the back, the working yarn just needs to rest against your fingers and you just hold it tight with your thumb like so. So you can see here on the front of your fingers, you have two parallel pieces of yarn. What you want to do with your crochet hook is go underneath the first piece and then hook over the second piece and draw it through. As you draw it through, you twist the crochet hook so you have a little twist in your yarn like so. Can you see? And that leaves you with this sort of elongated cross shape on the front of your fingers. Before pulling the yarn out, which will just sort of leave it back to the beginning again, what you want to do is hook around the top left section of the cross, and loosening slightly, you want to pull that section through the loop that you made. As I said, it can be quite fiddly, but once you've got it, see, I'm going to have to do it again, but that's okay. So just to remind you, you drape over the front, you wrap around making a cross, and you wrap around making two parallel lines. You hook underneath the first one, over the second and twist. Then you pick up that top left section of the X, and if it helps, let go of your working yarn and pull through. I hope that made sense to everybody. If you guys need to go and watch another magic circle tutorial, I totally understand, because sometimes I need to watch more people doing it than just me to be able to do it. But as you can see, the reason it's called a magic circle is now that we've got it, we can change the size really easily. This means that you can pull your circle really tight when you're working in the round, and so you don't have a hole in the middle of your work. So now we've got our magic circle. The way I like to hold my working yarn is I hook it with my little finger like that, and then I hook it over my finger like this. That just means it's really easy to pick up, but also I can thread the yarn through my finger like that. It does lead to hand cramp after a while, but it's the easiest way I've found. So what we do now is we do 6 single crochets within the circle. So that means going through the circle, picking up from our working yarn, taking back through the circle, and then we have 2 stitches on our hook. Then we want to pick up from the working yarn again and draw through both stitches. So we do that 5 more times. So through the circle, pick up on the hook, pick up on the hook again, and through the 2. Through the circle, pick up on the hook, back through the circle, pick up on the hook and through the 2. I'm just going to do the last 3 really quickly. If you need to look back on that, feel free. So now you can see this is the start of our circle. Now the magic circle is not the only way to create the beginning of a circle, but as you can see it's just a lot easier because when I pull on that end of yarn just there, it pulls that circle really nice and tight. So now what we want to do is find the first stitch in the magic circle that we made and insert our hook into it. You'll see a stitch looks like sort of an upside down V, and you want to insert your hook into both of those V arms, as you can see there. Then we're going to do exactly what we did with the single crochet into the magic circle, but we're going to do it into the stitch. So we pick up and pull back through the stitch, and then we've got 2 on the crochet hook. We pick up and pull through both. Then, just because now we've connected to the circle, we can pull the magic circle string really tight, and that has formed our beautiful little circle. So rather than move straight onto the next stitch, we actually want to work within the same stitch again. So if you find that lovely V shape again, just here, and insert your crochet hook into it, we're doing another single crochet into that stitch. So we pick up, we pull through the stitch, then we've got 2, we pick up and we pull through both. So that's 2 lovely stitches. Now for each of the 5 original stitches that we did around, we are also going to do 2 single crochets into each. So that means 12 in all. We've done 2, so that's 10 more. I will take you through it real slow, but hopefully we will have gotten on board with the single crochet right now. So I'll just count the stitches as I do them. So we've done 1, 2, 3, 4 into the same stitch, move on, 5, 6 into the same stitch, move on, 7, 8 into the same stitch, move on, 9, 10 into the same stitch, move on, and finally 11, 12 into the same stitch. So now as you can see, the bottom of our mug cozy, the circle on the bottom, is starting to take shape, and now all we need to do is keep working in rounds to make it bigger. That just involves adding more stitches each time, because otherwise it will start to curl up rather than remain like a flat circle. It's pretty simple how we do that. So holding your yarn tight. If you find that pulling the yarn through your working stitch is becoming quite difficult, hold the yarn a little bit looser, and that will create a bigger circle, bigger stitch to pull your working yarn through. I tend to work quite tightly, but that's just from experience. So while before we did 2 stitches in every single stitch, now what we want to do is in our first stitch, as you can see the next stitch on the round just here, we do just 1. And then in the next stitch, we do 2. So this overall, once we get back to the beginning, will create 18 stitches in this round. So I'm going to count for you so you don't lose it. So we've done 1, 2, 3, then we do 4 in the next stitch, move on, and then do 5 and 6 in the next stitch. There we go. Then we do 7 in the next stitch, move on and do 8 and 9 in the next stitch. We're halfway there. This is the most complicated bit of the pattern. So once you've got this bit down, the rest of it's easy. So then we do 10 in the next stitch. Move on and do 11 and 12 in the next stitch. There we go. We do 13 in the next one and 14, 15 in the next one. I guess I need to pull my yarn a little bit, starting to run out. And then our final 3 stitches, we do 16 in this stitch, moving on, 17, 18 in this stitch. If you lose track, just count back from the stitches that you've done, and there should be 18 stitches in the circle. So as you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. There we go. That may have been a bit complicated for you to see, but I promise you I did count them all and there are 18. So it's just 2 more increasings that we need to do. If you find that the middle of your circle is getting a little bit loose, just pull on that loose string again and it will tighten up that magic circle for you. So to increase again, what we need to do is work 1 stitch into the following 2 stitches. 1 single crochet into the following 2 stitches and then 2 single crochets into 1. I'll show you what I mean by that. So what we want to do is work 1 stitch into here and then move on to 1 stitch into here, and then in this third one we want to do 2. 1, 2. There we go, and you just repeat that around. You should have 24 stitches overall, so you work in kind of multiples of 4. So I'll count for you again so you don't get lost. We've done 4 there. We do 1 stitch in here, that's 5. We do 6 into the next one. And we do 7 and 8 into this one. There we go, fabulous. And then we do 9 into the next one, 10 into the next, and then 11 and 12 into the same one. There we go. Then we do 13, 14, and then 15, 16 into the next, 17, 18, 19, 20 into the next, 21, 22, 23, 24 into the final stitch. Fabulous. So your circle should be getting bigger. If you've got a fluffier yarn, it will be a little bit less defined, but as you can see, it starts to make this really beautiful sort of floral kind of pattern as it comes out. And then we need to do one more increase. So you may have guessed what's going to happen next. We do one single crochet into the next 3 stitches, and then we do 2 single crochets into the 4th. So that should create 5, and then we have to do that up to a number of 30. So I'll show you just quickly. So not even quickly, just we go 1 single crochet into the first stitch, 2 single crochets into the next, 3 single crochets into the next, and then 4 and 5 into this one. 4, 5. I hope that made sense. It's just adding another single crochet onto the previous round. So we're just going to go round again, and I'll count for you. So we do 6 into the next, 7 into the next, 8, and then 9 and 10 into the following one. Need to pull my yarn again. Ooh, there it is. There we go. Then we do 11, 12, 13, and then 14, 15. 16 into the next, 17, 18, and then 19, 20 into the next one. Go, nearly done. We do 21, 22, 23, and then 24, 25 into the next one. Final one, we do 26, 27, 28, and 29, 30 into the next one. Look at that. Now we've got the beautifully increased circle we've got here. So as you can see, if we just kept going out like that, we'd just create a bigger and bigger circle, but we don't want to do that. We want to create a beautiful mug cozy. So in order to turn the work so it starts working upwards from the circle rather than just outwards, the next round out is a little bit complicated, but you've got me. I'll write this down in the pattern as well, so don't you worry, and just rewind as many times as you need to keep on top of things. Sorry, it took me a really long time to finish that sentence. I'm going to say one more thing to you, just because this bit can be a bit complicated, and I want you guys to feel confident to go back on yourself and start again. So just to say, if you do drop, or if you do not know where you are in a stitch, you very easily can go back to a couple of stitches before. So if you see I drop my hook off of the stitch here and pull slightly, I can actually just really gently pull out a couple of stitches, and as you can see from there, that was 29 and 30 that was in my final stitch, and then I just reinsert my hook into the last place that I was familiar with what I was doing and start again from there. Even if that's like 5 rows back was the last place you were familiar with what you were doing, you need to feel comfortable with what you're doing when you crochet, and if you are completely out of your depth, just go back to the last place where you knew what you were doing. There we go. So this next round, what I'm going to suggest you guys do is place a stitch marker. Now, I know not everyone has the fancy little plastic stitch markers that people use, and I actually don't either. So what I use is the tail of my magic circle. What I do is I just take that up and I wrap it around the stitch. You see like that? And then hold it down against my circle. What that does is just makes the tail of the magic circle stick out of the circle where the start of my row is. So that's the way that I know when to stop, because otherwise I just keep going round and round and round and I don't know when the end of my circle is. That's the fun thing about a circle. So if you want to do that, that's great. Otherwise you have to be very good at counting. What we do now is a slip stitch. So into our next stitch, we work just as if we were doing a single crochet. We go through the stitch and we pick up the yarn and take it back through. But instead of picking up the yarn again, we just take that same yarn and pull it through the stitch that's already on our hook. So what's called a slip stitch. It doesn't work outwards in any way, but it leaves the stitch on the circle, on the hook. So you can move forward without creating any more stitches in your work. So we do that for the first one. Then we do a chain stitch, which is just the next bit of a single crochet without the first bit, basically. And that just involves picking up the working yarn on your hook and pulling it through your loop. So we've done a slip stitch and we've done a chain stitch. Then we're using the same stitch that we did the slip stitch in, we do a single crochet. So that involves going through, picking up, having two, picking up, and having one. So we did all of that stuff within the first stitch. As you can see here, the nice long bit of yarn from my magic circle is keeping my stitch marker in. So that will show me when to stop my round. So we did all that in the same stitch. Now what we want to do is skip the next stitch. So you can see this stitch here, we don't want to do anything in there. What we actually do is move on to the following stitch and do 2 single crochets into that. So that's picking up the yarn, drawing through, picking up and drawing through, and then within the same one, we pick up the yarn, draw through and through. So in short terms, what you do is you do a slip stitch, a chain, a single crochet, skip a stitch, and then 2 single crochets. Sounds complicated, but you literally just do that all the way around. And once you've got it written down, which it will be in the pattern, you can just follow those instructions over and over again until you get back to your stitch marker. So I'll show you carefully once again, and then I'll just go fast around so that we can get to the next bit. But if you need to re-look over this or you need to undo and start again, don't feel like you're failing. It is hard, and once you've got it down, it's just like you'll see, it's just muscle memory. You just go through it. So what you would do to the next one is straight into the next stitch, you do a slip stitch, which is pulling the yarn through the stitch and then through the loop on your hook. You do a chain stitch, which is picking up your working yarn and pulling it through the loop on the hook. And then you do a single crochet into the same stitch. So that's picking up the yarn, drawing through the stitch, and then picking up the yarn again and drawing through both loops on your hook. Then you want to skip this next stitch. You don't want to do anything to that. And then in the following stitch, you do 2 single crochets, which is picking up, drawing through, picking up again and drawing through both loops. So you want to do that twice in the same stitch. I will show you one more time and then I'm going to zoom through the next bits. So we do a slip stitch in the next stitch, we chain 1 and we do a single crochet. We skip the next stitch and we do 2 single crochets in the following one. Right, I'm going to zoom through now, just because it would be easy. From here, you just need to do the exact same thing until you get round to your stitch marker. As you can see, now that I've got it down, it's quite easy for me. And if you practice, it will literally be the same for you. You don't need to worry about the fact that I can do it quicker. That's just through practice. Also, this yarn is very, very easy to do it with. Sometimes when I'm using a flakier yarn, I'm a little bit more doolally and all over the place. There we go. Okay, so I've done that round. As you can see, I got back to the stitch marker. Don't go any further than that because we've done all we need to do. What it's done is made like a sort of foofy, slightly podgier round. And what that will do is turn the work so it starts working upwards from here. Now what you want to do is remove the stitch marker, and that just involves turning it over and pulling that bit out. And then we want to replace it. So basically do the exact same thing. Pull it over and wrap it round your stitch. The stitch that's on the hook, that is. Now comes the easy bit. So you actually just start working in rounds, and we want to do 3 before we start adding the gap for the 3 rounds, sorry, before we start adding the gap for the handle. And so basically all you need to do is into your next stitch, do 1 single crochet, skip a stitch, so this little one here, and then do 2 single crochets. And that is literally all you need to do all the way around. So as you can see, you've got your stitch marker here, and that will show you when you've done 1. We want to do it 3 times around. Now, the first round is going to be difficult because of the stitches that we did in the previous round. You've got some weird shaped stitches and you've got some weird placed stitches. But just remain patient, and even if it involves really digging in with your crochet hook, sometimes I suggest going in with the small end of your crochet hook and then turning it round. Do you see? Basically, just do what you can, and I trust whatever you guys are doing. When I first started doing it, I was sure I was doing it wrong, but it just is quite hard to work into those original stitches. But once you've done 1 round, all the stitches are easy to work into, so that's absolutely fine. So I'll show you again. What we do all the way around is the next stitch, we do 1 single crochet. Then we skip a stitch. And then in the next stitch, we do 2 single crochets. I'll show you one more time because the next one I think is a hard to get into stitch, and I'll show you how I deal with that. So if it is a hard to get into stitch, like this teeny tiny one here, can you see? What I do is I work at it with the smaller end of my hook, and then within the stitch I turn the hook round. See how that works? So within there, I do 1 single crochet. Sometimes it takes a little bit of wiggling to get that stitch out again. Yeah. Then you skip that stitch and do 2 single crochets in there. Fab. And just so you just keep working round from there. So you work round once till you get to the stitch marker, leave the stitch marker in, or replace it if it helps you, you to have it quite close to the top. Otherwise, just leave the stitch marker in and you'll see getting wider and wider. And you do that 3 times. So in your 3rd return to the stitch marker is when we'll do our next bit. It's when we start working in the handle gap, the handle hole. So what I'm going to do is just keep going round. So just follow what I'm doing here. If you need to go back and read the instructions again, that's absolutely fine. You just go round and round. Sorry if I'm sometimes slipping out of the camera view. I don't normally do this in front of a camera, so I normally do it really close to my face. So this is for you guys. There we go. I'm just going to pull on my wool. What I'm actually going to do is get quite a lot of it, because I want to work fast. Only do that if you know you're not going to be going anywhere for a bit, because there is nothing worse than undoing loads of your yarn and then having to up sticks and move places and being surrounded by yarn. I often did that on the train when I used to do it on the train, and it meant that I had many difficulties with balls of yarn running away from me on the train. Very embarrassing. And here we are. So this is actually only my first round. So it can take you as slow as you need. So as you can see, I hit a couple of difficult stitches on that round. So I just took my time and worked within them, and I've made it round to my stitch marker. I'm going to leave it in there. You can just pull it out and replace it if you like. What I'm going to do is just skip forward to when I've done my my other 2 rounds. Right, so we skip forward slightly. I've done the second and third rows of the single crochet skip, 2 single crochets, and that means I've made it back to my stitch marker, which I can now remove. I don't need anymore because as you'll see in a minute, it'll be really easy to know when the end of your row is. As you can see, because of the really weird, complicated row we did earlier, the work has started to curl at the edges, and that means that, as you can see, it starts to become a really gorgeous cozy that will wrap around an entire mug, not just the bottom. So we've reached this point in our crochet. We've just done 2 single crochets into a stitch, and instead of carrying on round, we need to start to create a gap for the handle to go into. So in order to do that, we chain 1. Remember how to chain. Oh, I should do it in the screen. We chain 1 just like that. We pick up and take through. This is so that we can start working out and make a row that is working outwards from the circle. And then we actually turn our work. So what we do to do is turn it round just like that and grab hold again. Sometimes it can go a little bit twisty, so if you need to twist your hook, that's absolutely fine. And now if you have a look here, the stitch we just created from chaining 1 is just here, right next to the hook. You actually want to leave that because that will leave a really nice line up the side of your handle gap, as we call it. So you don't want to do anything to that. You actually want to work into the next stitch just here and just do a single crochet into that. There we go. So in order to tighten the sides of the mug cozy slightly so that it's not too loose around your mug, we're going to do a couple of different stitches in the beginning of this round. So instead of doing 2 single crochets into the stitch following the skipped stitch, we do the same in that we skip a stitch, but then we just do 1 single crochet into the following. I hope that made sense. What we do is you do a single crochet into the first stitch, skip a stitch, do a single crochet. Then we skip another stitch and do a single crochet once more. So that's the only bit of difference for a while. So then we carry on round like we did with the previous rows. So we do a single crochet, skip a stitch, and then a double crochet. Apologies, double crochet is not what I meant. I mean 2 single crochets. Double crochet is something different, which you won't need to worry about. So just like that, you see? So again, we do a single crochet, skip a stitch, and do 2 single crochets. So you just keep doing that all the way around. I'm going to do it relatively fast until there are 6 stitches left before this little sticky up bit here. So you just keep going round, remembering where I am. If you struggle to remember, you can see just here, you can see this has 2 single crochets in because it's got 2 little V shapes. And you can see this has 1 single crochet in because it only has 1 little V shape. So if you do get lost about where you are and don't want to have to go back to where you last remember, that's a useful little tip. So that, because it's got 1 single crochet in, I know to skip 1 and do 2 single crochets in the next. Once you have 6 stitches left, What you want to do is similar to the beginning of this row, we do a single crochet into the next stitch, we skip a stitch, we do a single crochet into the next stitch, we skip a stitch, and we do a single crochet into the next stitch. As you can see, this bit at the beginning when you did the chain stitch has started to stick up as its own little row, and we need to do the same to the sides, so we need to do another chain stitch on the other side. Every time you start a new row from here on out, you need to do a chain stitch. Then we're going to turn the work again. It's a little bit easier working on this side because the curl is stuck up this way, but you can change which way the curl is stuck up. Just like on the other one, I'm going to twist my hook round because I find it easier. We don't want to work within the stitch closest to the hook. So we skip that stitch and put a single crochet in the next stitch. Then we skip a stitch, put a single crochet in here, skip a stitch, put a single crochet in here, and then we work round like we did before. So next stitch we do a single crochet in, skip, 2 single crochets, single crochet, skip, 2 single crochets. And this time you work around until you have 4 stitches left before the end of the row. And with 4 stitches left on the row, just here, we then do a single crochet in the next stitch. We skip 1 stitch, we do a single crochet in the next stitch, and then a single crochet in the final stitch. It can be quite hard to find the final stitch of the row because you have this nice border coming up, but just like I say, give it a little bit of a wiggle and you should be able to find it. There we go. So now we actually just start doing the same thing around and around and around until the cozy is big enough for your mug. So I will show you what that is. Basically what you do is at the start of every new row, and by new row I mean anytime you're at the end of either of these sides, you do a single chain stitch, you twist turn your work around, and then just as it is before, you don't work into the first stitch from your hook, you work into the next. You do a single crochet into there, you skip 1 stitch, and you do 2 single crochets into there. And that is literally all you do around. This is just working upwards. So there's no more complicatedness to that. You just do single crochet, skip, 2 single crochets. It's as easy as that. So just keep working round and around and around, and for your mugs I would recommend keeping a mug close by to be a kind of measurement. You want to stop just at the top of your handle, and that's when we come on to the next bit. But I'm gonna just leave you guys to do this by yourselves now, and we'll move on to the rim once we're finished, because there's no point in you watching me do it when you could be doing it yourselves. So like I say, just a single crochet, skip a stitch, 2 single crochets all the way around, and when you get to the end, do a chain stitch to bring it outwards. So just keep going and I'll see you in a minute. Right, so as we can see, I've made quite a bit of progress on my mug cozy. This doesn't need to be something you do constantly for, you know, however long it takes. You can take a break, you can, you know, do whatever and come back to it, because as long as you kind of remember where you are, it's absolutely fine. In fact, I've had a break, I've made myself a nice cup of coffee and I've come back to it and it's absolutely fine. So what we need to do now is we actually just need to check how tall the mug cozy is. And you doing that, you just need to grab one of your favourite mugs or whatever mug you're making this mug cozy for, and literally, if we take the crochet hook out, don't worry, it won't, unless you pull really hard on that, it won't unravel. What we need to do is literally just pop the mug inside. If you give it a little bit of a tug, make sure that circle bit is completely surrounding the bottom. Give it a bit of a tug, and what we want is we want it to be just literally right up to the point of the top of the handle. You don't want it any higher than that because we're going to do a couple of rows after this, and if you make it any higher, the mug cozy will come right up to the top of the mug, and then you will have to get a damp mug cozy when you drink your tea, because your lips get in the way. So this is perfect. It may feel like it's going a little bit low on the other side, but don't worry, when we finish it and put it on the mug, it will be perfect. So literally, you just want it right up to the top of the handle, just there. There we go. So we put this aside and we move on to the final rows. So what we've done here is we actually haven't done our single chain and turn, because we actually want to keep going round. So as you can see, my final stitch in this stitch here has been 2 single crochets. So instead of doing 1 chain and turn, we actually want to do 3 chains. So if we remember, that's picking up on the hook. Ooh, I need to adjust my position slightly. There we go. So picking up on the hook and taking through the stitch. And we're going to do that 2 more times. There we go. So now we've got a little extra bit, and that's to connect the 2 sides of the row, so you have a nice gap that doesn't go on forever, isn't an infinite gap. So now we want to connect it. So in order to do this, we literally just do a row like we did before. So that is a single crochet, leave a stitch, and then 2 single crochets. So what we do is we find that stitch, can you see, just in the start of the next row. We go through that and do a single crochet. As you can see, that's already connected it up, so it's perfect. We just need to make it look a little bit stronger. And I'm just going to move my coffee because I keep knocking it with my elbow, and that's not good. So what we do next is, just like the previous rows, we skip the next stitch and we go on and do 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And you just do that all the way around, including these 3 here, but I'll show you when we get to that point. So just like you did in the previous rounds, you do 1 single crochet, skip a stitch, 2 single crochets, just like before. So I'm just going to do that all the way around. There we go. And when we reach these last 3 stitches that we've created, you don't actually need to insert into both sides of the V, just because it will, because it's such a thin chain stitch, it will actually leave it quite weak on the bottom. So you actually just need to insert into the top of the V, just 1 little stitch here, and do your single crochet. There we go. And then skip the next stitch and do the same in the 3rd. Find that top of the V. There you go, can you see? Ooh, might take a little bit of wiggling because wool can be quite slippery. There we go. And do 2 single crochets into there. Perfect. And now we find ourselves on our final row. So this is quite exciting. It means that we can be finished soon and we can cover our beautiful mug with it. As you can see, the handle gap is nice and wide, nice big. It'll make a really nice sort of gap for your handle. So your final row is the simplest row we've done actually. We just want to do an entire round of single crochets. So that's in every single stitch. So you find the first stitch, you go and do a single crochet. Then you find the next stitch and do the same. So it's super simple. You just want to do it all the way around. What this will do is just create a kind of rim to the mug cozy. It'll make it a tiny bit tighter than the rest of the design, and that'll just mean that it holds on tight to your mug. Also with crochet, oftentimes the kind of openings in whatever work you do gets looser over time, so we just want to make sure that we're guaranteeing it stays nice and tight. So you just go around doing a single crochet in the entire thing. There we go. The only difference in the last few stitches, which I'll show you in a minute, is when you reach the top of that handle gap, instead of doing single crochets, you just want to do slip stitches. That's just to make sure it's super tight and it connects, and so it doesn't have a sort of big lumpy bit here. So that's on the last 4 stitches, as you can see here. So what we do is just like a single crochet, we go through with the working yarn and then just take that through the stitch on your hook, and we do that 2 more times. Through and through. Sorry, did I say 2 more? I meant 3 more times. Fabulous. Fab. And look at that, we've actually created a beautiful mug cozy. There's one more step to this, so I will show you how to tie off, and then we can do the final bit. I actually don't have any scissors with me, so I'm going to quickly grab some scissors. There we go. So what you want to do is in your final stitch, just do a single chain like you do before. So pick up the working yarn and pull it through, and then just keep pulling it through so you have a nice tail on it, and pull the end of the yarn tight that isn't the one that comes from the working yarn. So this is just making sure that hole is nice and tight. Oh, mine's gone a bit curly. There we go, so pull it nice and tight. And then if you've got a nice tail going, take your scissors and just chop that off. There we go. This way you can pull the working yarn out, throw it away, and you've got a nice tail on the end, which I'll show you what to do with in a second. And look at that, your beautiful mug cozy. So the final step to this is just to make sure this is nice and tight around your handle. We're just going to do a simple single crochet stitch around. And I actually like to change colour for this bit, just because I'm a very colourful person and I like to do different things. You can stay the same colour, that's absolutely fine. Also, changing colour here will show you how to do it a little bit easier, because you won't get lost in the colour I was using before. So I'm just going to use a nice simple double knitting yarn, as you can see here. It's a lovely pink yarn. I don't have much regard for what colours go together. I think all colours can go together if you like. And so just choose whatever colour you want. If you want to go for a very lovely muted colour, you know, something that actually goes with the colour that you're using, that's absolutely fine. If you want to go for something that is the absolute other end of the colour spectrum, that is also fine. Follow your heart. So what we want to do here is we want to start up the end where our little tail is, and that's because we're going to use this tail to tie off at the end and make it nice and neat so we don't see any tails. So just literally stick your hook, through a little bit of yarn here into your mug cozy, and that can be literally anywhere. So it can be this little easy one piece of yarn here, but it also can be like right in the middle of a stitch here. Actually, I'll show you what it would be like to do it right in the middle of a stitch here. Then we take our different coloured yarn or same coloured yarn, and we just make a little loop out of it like this. We hook that round our hook, and we pull it through. And it's as easy as that. Whenever you change colour, it's literally as easy as that. This way, if you hold on tight to your working yarn, you've got a nice extra stitch on the hook. As long as you keep holding tight to the first stitch, you shouldn't lose it. And the way I like to do this to make sure that it's extra tight is to start with a chain stitch. So holding on to that extra little tail of working yarn with your middle finger is how I do it. And then holding onto your working yarn however you like to do it. Literally just pick up and do a chain stitch outwards. And there we go. So, like I said, what we're doing for this whole round is just single crochets all around. And that's literally just finding gaps wherever you can and doing a single crochet. So there's no right or wrong answer to this. As you can see, I've got a nice little gap here. So I'm going to go through, pick up again, and go through both, and that's a single crochet. And then just keep going round. Got a nice little gap there. So pick up, do a single crochet, and around. You need to adjust what you're holding while you do it, just to make sure that it all fits. That's a nice big one, so I'm going to do a nice single crochet in that. This is just to make sure that mug, the handle gap stays nice and tight around your handle. It also gives it a nice variance in colour if you are changing colour. So even if you don't know how to do zigzags yet or anything, at least you've got like some sort of different colour on the handle, on the mug cozy itself. There we go, so just keep going around, and like I say, there's no wrong or right answer to where you stick the hook in. You're just finding your way around any way you may know how. And doing single crochets just like we did before. There's no complicated stitch we're doing here, so just sticking it through the hole, picking up the yarn, coming through, picking up the yarn again, and taking through both stitches on the hook. And as I reach that last stitch, I just want to do a slip stitch into it. So holding on tight to that little tail, because we don't want to actually accidentally undo the stitch we did at the beginning. We just go through both sides of the V. There we go. Pick up and go all the way through. And voila, we've got a nice little border on the handle gap that we made. So what we're going to do is the exact same thing we did before to tie off. So we pick up just like we use in a chain stitch and pull it a little bit through, pull tight on that bit, and grab our scissors and chop that off. There we go. We can get rid of our working yarn now, and we've got these two little stringy bits which don't make a very attractive look, do they? So what we actually do with this is literally just turn it inside out slightly and get a hold. Actually, we've got three little stringy bits, so I'll show you what we do with these. What we do is get hold of them, get hold of the two that you've done for the border first, and just tie them together. You don't want it so tight that that it starts like making a misshapen mug cozy, but you don't want it too loose. So just tie it together in a nice little double knot. There we go. And whichever one is the longer, you want to keep hold of that one, and you can chop off the end of the shorter one. There we go. Then we get the long bit of the border yarn and the long bit of the body yarn, and do the exact same thing. If you find they're a little bit too far apart, you can get a darning needle and sort of weave the either one of the yarns into the mug cozy a little bit, but this is absolutely fine to do it like this. I'm actually going to do 3 in this one just to make sure it's extra tight. This I find is just the best way at keeping these little threads out of the way. Some people may have different kind of ideas, they want to do different things, that's absolutely fine. But this is the best way for me. These are not very good scissors. There we go. And here we have our completed mug cozy. So now what you need to do is just grab yourself a mug. It'll be quite tight at the start, so you just want to pull it over like so. And voila. There we go. So that is our completed mug cozy. From here you can put any decoration on it that you want. I'm going to do a separate video for the ladybird appliques that I did on my mug cozy at the beginning. But yeah, so I hope you guys have fun. I've been covering every single mug in my house with these mug cozies recently because I find it a very satisfying pattern to do. And if you guys have any questions, just pop it in the comments. I'll be happy to answer, sorry.